Good afternoon. I'm really excited to be here. You know, I'm used to a fog machine entrance, Jerry, but if the Grand Del Mar is the best you got, I'll take it. Beautiful location, beautiful people. I'm really excited to be here. And I am excited to share with you this idea that we've been working on, and it's the key. And the first three speakers really kind of queued me up nicely, because the key that I want to talk about is the key to sustainable personal change. The psychology behind why we do what we do and why we don't do some of the things that we really want to be doing. So understanding that root cause and that underlying issue that really drives us to behave in certain ways and not in others. And so the key to that behavior change is really to embrace change. And as I was sitting here working on this presentation a few months ago, my son, who's 8 years old, many of you know, Max, he came up and was asking me some questions. He was like, "Hey, Mom, when's your birthday?" And I was like, "Oh, good boy. You know, way to get ahead of that one." I'm like, "It's September 28th. He goes, No, the year." I was like, "Ugh, all right. We're going to go there. 1975. And he goes, "Whoa, you were born in the 1900s?" As soon as I was done grounding him, right, it hit me. You know, I started all of a sudden had this flashback to the 1980s, you know, the 1990s. Who here had that big hair, the big hair, right? Anybody here have that? Where they needed an entire can of Aquanet to hold it up in front, right? We know Jerry had the big hair, right? We've all seen that. And I thought to myself, thank God I embraced that change. Right? And I got to the other side of what life was like without, you know, a can full of hairspray. And it's hard sometimes to think about change. You know, as adults, we get really rooted in our ways of doing things. You know, I have the great pleasure to work with a lot of awesome individuals and teams and CEOs and leaders. And one of the things that I hear most often are phrases like, "Well, that's just the way that I am," or "That's just how he does things." Or "That's okay, you know, we can fix it next time." And so we excuse this behavior for ourselves all the time simply because maybe we have the authority to do so, or we have that permission, and we let ourselves off the hook. And so I'm really here to challenge you that as leaders, you have an awesome responsibility that comes along with that power that you have. And that responsibility is what we heard about in the first three, where we have to really take ownership for our own actions as leaders. And we have to recognize that to be a part of the solution, we also have to recognize that we're a part of the problem. And how do we go about doing that? And so my goal today is to share with you this idea about personal change and the mindset that's necessary to create it sustainably over time, and then to give you a tool to actually teach it to the teammates around you, to teach it to your peers, your colleagues, your coworkers, the people who report to you, so that they can also show up and achieve their own ideas of personal success successfully. And so the key is just this: it's to embrace the change. Because the mindset, the human nature, is to resist change. We want to fight against it. And I want to tell you guys, this is natural. This is what we do. This is your human DNA in action. For those of us who have seen Simon Sinek and some of his TED Talks, we know he talks about the power of safety and how that's what often our organization can create for us. And even when we were back in the caveman days, we would actually create these communities and these environments where we could protect ourselves from the real threats that were in our environment. Today, those threats are new. They could be things like being fired or getting laid off, or, you know, losing your car or a spouse or a loved one. You know, our threats have changed, but we still operate from this place of resistance. And it's because it's a natural instinct for us to resist doing something different. Let me give you an example. Everybody here fold your arms right now. Fold your arms. I want you to just observe real quickly. Do you have right over left or left over right? I happen to have left over right. Now I want you to just switch it for me. Just switch to what's not normal. Yeah. How's that feel? Right? How's that feel? Yeah, weird. Right? And what's your natural inclination? Yeah, to go immediately back to the way that we were. And I highlight that to demonstrate to you that you come by it honestly. These are your natural instincts at play. So how do you overcome nature? What does that look like? Well, we have to choose to evolve. And this becomes part of that embracing change, is we have to be willing and open to accept the evolution that has to happen for our companies, for our products, our services, our team, and of ourselves. You know, I don't know if you know about the African elephants, but they've been fighting a pretty tough road for the last 100 years against poachers. And there was an article published 2 weeks ago that talked about 98% of African elephants are now being born with little to no tusks. 100 years of poaching, researchers tell us, and evolution, nature has kicked in and started to help create safety and a safeguard for them. But the reality is, do you have 100 years for nature to kick in and to help you to evolve, to get to where you want to go? My guess is you're going to need a lot more of those physical therapists and chiropractors to get you across those finish lines that we saw him accomplish on all those bucket list items. You'd never be able to do that if you waited for nature to run its course. And so I encourage you to figure out how you can embrace that evolution that needs to happen within you. What does that need to look like? How do you go about that? And first and foremost, you need to have awareness that you're even part of the problem. The number of times that I hear stories about, I give a presentation and it's called The 5 Fundamentals to a High Performance Team. And we talk a lot in that presentation about playing the game above the line, ownership, accountability, responsibility, learning every day. And I can't tell you the number of times that I'll finish that presentation and I come off stage and the CEO will pull me aside and I'll go, how'd you think it goes? He goes, you know what? I think it was great. I hope they got it. And what do you think I do when I hear them say that? Yeah, slug them. Right? And I go, oh, well, not everyone got it. Right? Because awareness is half the battle. Thanks, G.I. Joe. Right? We learned that one when we were really young. In order to take new actions and new behaviors, we first have to be aware of the things that we're doing today. We first have to be aware that maybe the way we say things isn't being received well. I heard a story this morning about a CEO who likes to say, well, yeah, that's just how I say things. I was just trying to speed up communication. So I thought if I just said it really directly and really quickly, then that would just speed things up. Well, the challenge is she didn't realize that she actually slowed down communication because she now had 10 extra meetings she had to do because she had to do damage control. She had to apologize. She had to rebuild trust. She had to re-demonstrate her capabilities to be able to articulate herself clearly with respect and dignity for all involved. And this little idea of creating awareness around who you are gives you the power to be able to start to do something differently. So the first thing after after awareness is ownership. No one has the capability to change you except for you. I'll share with you a personal story. It's 2002. I was 27 years old, and I'm sitting on a bench, my favorite bench in Pacific Beach, Lotus style. I found myself without a job, without a car, without any friends and family nearby. And I was wondering how I got here. And I started to reflect on all the circumstances in my life. Was it the abusive boyfriend that beat me up and left me on the side of the road and destroyed all my stuff? Was it the abusive mother that never could find a way to find anything positive to say to me or about me? Or was it the alcoholic father who, for whatever reason, seemed to find more pleasure from a can of beer than from spending any time with me? And I found in that moment that as I was having the pity party, the lowest common denominator in each one of these stories or reasons that I gave myself was me. I was the lowest common denominator, and I had a choice. I could choose how I looked at each of those circumstances, and I could choose to use them as tools with which to beat myself up and give myself permission to stay down, or I could use them as reasons to become who I knew I could be. And in that moment, I resolved to pull myself up by my bootstraps and to move forward. And so I encourage each and every one of you to own your shit. Take responsibility. Because at the moment you're providing reasons, I want you to remember those are just fat excuses. And as excuses and reasons, and adults, we call these excuses reasons, and as adults, these stories have climaxes and plot lines and characters, and they come to life. And they're these stories that we tell ourselves. But then we get rooted in those ruts, and we get stuck in those stories, and we become unwilling to move and change. And so I really implore you to look around you and to look at your team and to challenge yourself. Of the issues that you're seeing with your team right now, what of that is you being reflected back at you? What things do you need to start doing differently so that they can start to emulate your behavior? Be the change you wish to see from your team. And then they will start to follow. And as a leader, I ask you, is your team following because you're the leader that they also want to be, or because your title and your signature on their paycheck requires them to? Because I think at the end of the day, each and every person in this room wakes up with the best intentions of providing an environment that helps them to thrive and grow. And so a great way that you can do that is, again, first by owning your shit, and then second, by taking action and practicing on a regular basis these ideas with which we think about. You know, in our experience, what we've found is that the average business and the average individual grossly underestimates how much time and practice it takes to actually achieve the greatness you're looking for. You know, we've all heard the master's journey is what? How many hours? 1? You practice 1 time, right? That's the master's journey? No, 2 times, right? You have to practice twice? No, how many times do we have to practice? 10,000 hours is how the story goes. And so are you showing up every single day, owning your stuff, thinking about how you can perform a little bit better, a little bit more in this situation, and how you can identify your challenges that you're working on and own them in that moment and practice and lead by that example so that everyone else can see you doing that as well? Now, I really believe that as leaders, we have this responsibility to lead by example and be that person we want them to be. And so we do that through our practice. And then our other responsibility to our team is to pay it forward. We have to teach them how to do these things successfully. I don't know if you guys have heard that phrase about common sense, but common sense isn't that what? Common. And it becomes so when we teach it to others. And here's the great news about teaching and why it's worth it for you to do this, is because when you teach other people, you actually reinforce it for yourself. It becomes something that you get better and better at. And so all of a sudden now it becomes that thing you had to work on now becomes unconsciously competent for you. It's just something that you naturally start to do. And I'd venture even to guess that a lot of you in this room are unconsciously competent about the success that you've created today. And you wish the team around you could do the same for them. And so in order to do that, you have to teach them. Well, how do you teach them? Well, you have to start to create a conscious competence about how you're doing what you're doing. And really making sure that you're transferring these skills in a way that they can learn and that they can grow and that they can apply it. So this is the tool that I wanted to share with you. How do you go about transferring? Because here's the reality. You know, oftentimes when we talk to our team and we try to share ideas with them, we say, hey, can you go ahead and get that report done for me? I'm going to need that done by Monday. And we turn around and we walk away, right? We go to meetings. Anybody here familiar with that one? All right. And then we come back and we're shocked that they didn't get it done well. And it's because we didn't properly walk them through how we wanted to do it. Oftentimes we'll explain what we want them to do and when we want it done by, so they know the goal and they know the objective. But do they know the steps on how to get it done? And guys, I'm not talking about micromanagement here. I'm talking about teaching them such that they can find their process and their way to execute it on a way that it both achieves our goals and helps them to develop this new skill with which you're trying to teach. You know, accountability is one of those things that we talked about being a big struggle as leaders and really holding people around. If we're trying to teach somebody accountability, how do we go about that? Well, first, we have to demonstrate what accountability looks like. So that demonstration looks like you holding yourself accountable. That looks like you showing up to meetings with your stuff done too. Not the excuses, oh, well, I got busy, or I was traveling, or I didn't get to that yet, and using your authority as the excuse for why you didn't get your accountabilities met. So first you have to demonstrate the behavior that you want to see. The second thing, you explain and then you demonstrate. The third thing you have to do is you have to go through it and you have to practice with them. You have to show them what it looks like, because often what I've found in accountability is that the main challenge with getting things done on time is not that their intentions weren't there, is that they struggled with prioritization. They didn't actually prioritize the right tasks first. So they did get stuff done, but not the important things done, or the things that we agreed to. And so do you sit down with them and do you teach them what prioritization looks like in your organization and how to go through that thought process? So do you explain why it's important? Do you demonstrate to them what it looks like? And then do you actually practice with them how to set priorities? This might look having a meeting with them, bringing them in, sitting them down, and going through, here's how I would prioritize this. The next set of tasks, you say, you come in, and now you show me how you would prioritize. And I will give you feedback and coaching on where you might be having some issues. And this paying it forward element where you actually get to transfer these skills, again, this is where you get to be the better version of yourself. And at the very same time, you get to help each of your teammates around you become that best version of themselves. And so, much like that young girl sitting on that bench in Pacific Beach, I encourage you to recognize that all the stories that you're telling yourself and all the things that are going on in your world, the lowest common denominator is you. And so now is the time to recognize your role, to embrace that change, to take awareness of it, to own it, do something about it, and then be brave and vulnerable enough to share your story with others. Teach it to the team around you and achieve that success on purpose. And that is how you make meaningful, sustainable, personal change. Thank you very much.